morning, members. It's 9 o'clock sharp, and we've already formed a quorum. I call the meeting to order. Let's invite the officials and the delegations to join us.
請秘書啊，嗱
Secretary. Chairman, I have to declare interest. Yes, sir. I'll give you your turn when we are on that. So let's invite the administration team and the deputations to join us. First of all, we'd like to welcome the Bureau Director, Mr. Gregory So, and Ms. Susie Ho, Permanent Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. She's the new incumbent Permanent Secretary, and Mr. Joe Wong, Deputy Secretary, and Mr. Aaron Liu, Principal Assistant Secretary. And from the Office of the CA, Mr. Vincent Liu, Deputy Director General, and Ms. Katie Fong, Assistant Director, and also Mr. Albert Chang from the DBC, and Mr. Maurice Ho, Chief Executive Officer. On this side, we have the Revival Campaign Action Committee Chairman, Mr. Peter Lam, and also Mr. Mac Yun Shao. They are all program hosts of DBC. In the public gallery, we also have Mr. Lau Nam Guang. He has been on hunger strike for more than 100 hours, and he'll be sitting in a public gallery. All right, just a short round of applause because supposedly you're not allowed to make any noise here. The purpose of today's meeting is to enable members of the panel to discuss the issue of the suspension of broadcasting services by the Digital Broadcasting Corporation, or the DBC. Last time, when we elected our chairman and deputy chairman, some members also asked for this special meeting to be convened, and of course, in response to members' requests, that was Mr. Albert Chen was the first one to raise it, and many members also either verbally or told the media that they would like to convene an open meeting, and less than 10 days after I have sworn in, I already convened this meeting. This is in response to the request by members in convening this meeting, and the panel has invited the different parties to attend the meeting, and of course we have also invited Mr. Bill Wong and Dr. or Professor Arthur Lee, who are shareholders of DBC, to attend today's meeting, but then they have told us that they are out of town today, and therefore they are not able to attend our meeting today. So please clip on your earpiece and microphone. Your microphone should be clipped on the lapel, and as you can see, we have this session with two rooms joining together. Initially, is a subdivided room. So, Mr. Chen, please do not touch the microphone. And channel 0 is the floor. Channel 1 is Cantonese, and channel 2 is English. Once again, I'd like to remind all the parties here that for officials and deputations attending today's meeting, their remarks and written submissions will not be covered by the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance. I'd also like to remind members that under 83A and 84 of the Rules of Procedure, with regard to today's discussion, if there is any direct or indirect pecuniary interest, then members should also declare such interest before they make any remarks. And Mr. Ronnie Tong, you may now declare your interest. Do I have to declare interest now? So before you speak, you will have to declare interest. According to my understanding, yes, I do have direct interest to declare, but then my attendance and also my speaking here would not be a problem. No, not a problem at all. And also, as you are aware, the DBC incident involves some litigation because litigation is ongoing, and therefore under 41(2) of the Rules of Procedure, members should not make reference to a sub judice case in such a manner that the chairman might think that is sub judice. And also, I'd like to report to members that on this occasion, we're going to have a transcript of the meeting instead of just having a set of minutes. And in order to facilitate our secretary in preparing the transcript and also the records, please do not speak in mixed language or mixed mode. Yes, I am subject to a court injunction right now. So before I speak, in order to facilitate members in considering how you should put your questions to the relevant parties, please do understand the details of the injunction. I understand that there is an injunction on this issue. What my reply to you is that whoever speaks will have to bear responsibility for his own remarks. Well, I also understand that we will also have to make sure that we will not be prejudicial to any court case that is pending, and therefore we will have to understand the extent of the injunction. Of course, if the relevant party refuses to give us the details, then of course we cannot help it. But then by all means, if we can be given the details, that would be nice. Mr. Albert Chan, yes, I'm subject to an injunction issued by the High Court with regard to the restriction imposed by the injunction on me. That's about myself. Alright, the injunction only targets at Albert Chan, that is me personally, and it's not applicable to DBC as a company and also other colleagues who are here. And with regard to the details of the injunction, I'll be personally responsible for that. Thank you for your reminder. Are you willing to disclose the details of the injunction, the content of the injunction? Number one, Chairman. I have not brought with me a copy of the injunction because it's a very thick document. That is whether or not is any information that has been released to the public with regard to the business or operations of the DBC. I'm not supposed to disclose the details, but then I'll be responsible for my own remarks today, including any criminal liability that such remarks may attract. First of all, I'll invite the Bureau Director, Mr. Albert Chan. You said that we have invited some guests and they are not here, and they said that they are out of town. So given the situation, we will be arranging for another meeting so that they can come along on other occasions. Well, to me, the most important thing is for the Bureau Director to be here. As for their time schedule, it's difficult to cater for them because originally we had intended to hold a meeting on the 29th, but then the Bureau Director has to be on a duty visit. That's why it's very difficult to cater for his schedule, and it's less than 10 days since we're sworn in. That's why, well, he can always send a representative here if he's willing to come. So it's difficult to cater for everybody's needs. Yes, Mr. Christopher Chong. Well, it said that you said that members will be required to declare their interests before they speak. But then we have to know their interests. How come they are not required to make such declaration before the meeting starts? So they should have made the declarations now. Oh, all right, you're a newcomer, and therefore you should not be so irritated so soon. I have to know his interests because he remains silent. Well, that has nothing to do with the incident, Mr. Christopher Chong. But then before he makes the declaration, how do you know? Well, so long as he can declare their interests before he makes before he makes any remarks, that will be okay. Mr. Ronnie Tong, are you willing to make the declaration? Well, I'll be willing to do it. Yes, I'm giving legal advice to Albert Chang and other minority shareholders. All right. That's okay. All right, Ms. Emily Lau, Chairman, did you mention the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance on the coverage of the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance, that the speaker's remarks would not be covered if they are not members of this council? All right, the procedure is I'll invite the secretary to make a statement. I'll give him 8 minutes, and for the CA, for the OFCA All right, they will also be included in the 8 minutes, so you don't necessarily have to spend up the 8 minutes. And we will also have to deal with a motion today. Mr. Albert Chan would like to move a motion that's in writing, and you can also refer to the wording of the motion. And he says that if there is a majority decision by the panel, then we can decide on whether the motion should be passed. All right, we will have to deal with that by around 10:30, and we have many members here, and we only have 2 hours scheduled for the meeting. And for the other representatives, they will each be given 5 minutes, and for members of a panel, they will be given 5 minutes for each round. And if there is time, we can have another round. Yes, Mr. Paul Chair, I was referring to 41(2) of the Rules of Procedure. With regard to any comments in this council, that should not be sub judice. And as Mr. Albert Chang said that he was fully aware of his criminal liability under the injunction. But then when we ask questions and make comments, we should at least know the scope of the case. For example, who is suing whom, and what is the subject in question, because whatever we say today, it might be sub judice. I think we will have to clarify the position before we proceed. Mr. Albert Chan, can you be a little more specific with regard to the content of the injunction? It's not about who is suing whom, because the court has just issued this injunction, and that's it. All right, it's okay. All right, Albert Chan, as he has already made it very clear, he said that he would be personally responsible for his remarks. But then Mr. Porcher is concerned that when questions are put to the relevant parties, if it involves the injunction, then of course our members might refrain from asking such questions. All right, I'll give Albert Chan another opportunity to respond to your question, and then we'll proceed to the discussion. Mr. Chan, all right, during the last term of this council, there was an occasion on which Mr. Godfrey was summoned, and Mr. Godfrey, indeed, that should have been part of my opening statement, and I said that because I was subject to this injunction, and if members would like to know from me more about the DBC, then I suggest that this panel should set up a select committee to look into the case, and then I'll be able to speak my mind as regards the scope of the injunction. As I'm not somebody from the legal profession, I only know what I can say and what I cannot say, and there might be many things that I cannot say or many things that I can say. But then as a former member of this council, I'd also like to remind Mr. Paul Chair, through you, Chairman, that for officials and members who are here, well, they are protected by the electoral powers and privileges ordinance, but then I can also choose not to answer your questions. But then we will have to know the content of the injunction, because including the Chairman and also other members, we have no idea as to what it is all about. We are not concerned about the case involved in the injunction. There must be a plaintiff and also a defendant. But then we have to know the content of it, or else if it's sub judice, then we should not be making remarks covering those. So it's not just about the injunction itself. It's about the substance of the injunction. Yes? Sorry, speaker's not coming through. Well, where there are parties suing the administration, very often the officials would say that because it's sub judice, they would not be free to express their views. For example, the Alliance on Special Education, there was a parent saying that there was a child suing the government for discrimination, and then the bureau director said that it's sub judice, and therefore he's not willing to give the details. And indeed, we discussed in detail on that occasion, because judges are independent. Well, even Elsie Leung's remarks cannot influence them. How can we influence the judge or the judiciary? Chairman, is it my turn? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Actually, for the parties who are here, and also for Mr. Chen, who is subject to the injunction, he'll be responsible for his own remarks. He knows very well what he can say and what he cannot say. And for this panel, we are just looking into press freedom, and we are just asking questions on those issues. So, Chairman, I'd like to ask you, do we have to spend time to discuss on this? Indeed, for electoral members, we should know our place. We should know whether or not we are asking issues about the policy or the incident itself. We have already spent 15 minutes on this, and therefore I'm making this ruling that we should proceed to the meeting itself. All right, Mr. Greg, so please make your opening statement.
First of all, I would like to thank you for accepting my request, that is to advance the meeting, which was originally scheduled for next Monday, to today, because I would really like to explain to the public what's happening to DBC. Now, as the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, I'm responsible for economic development and the promotion of DAB operations, etc. And also, the OFCA is responsible for the regulation of the radios, and also they will be looking at complaints that are against such broadcasters. And it has been the government's policy that we would support sound broadcasting and its development. And the government has insisted that speech freedom be protected. As for the regulators in Hong Kong, they have always been respecting the editorial autonomy of broadcasters and licensees, and we will not interfere in the internal affairs of licensees. And we in Hong Kong can accommodate different voices. So the broadcasters can decide on their own editorial stance, and they can provide programs to cater for the taste of their audience. As for the host, program hosts and commentators, no matter whether they are supporting the government or criticizing the government, they are free to do so every day. And there is no monopoly. As for different broadcasters, they may be formed by or supported by different people, backed by different fundings, that's like any other companies in the market. So if there are disputes among shareholders and if they adopt different positions, etc., this is actually not rare. So in face of these, commercial companies should try to resolve their own problems. And this cannot be shifted onto the government's shoulders, and it cannot say that the government should be interfering with such internal affairs. So if they cannot resolve their problems, they should take legal actions, and the government will not and should not be a commercial mediator. Now, asking the government to interfere in to intervene in the disputes of private company shareholders, this would set a very dangerous precedent. And I believe that the public and councillors would not like to see this. With regard to DBC's investment amount and its license, we know that there are restrictions concerning its investment amount. However, as for the capital injections of different directors, it's not regulated. So the licensee would have to look at this itself. In February this year, DBC shareholders has already injected funds exceeding the amount that will be spent on the infrastructure of programming for the first year. I have heard an incident that is a tape has been leaked concerning the internal dialogues of the shareholders, and also at the request of Mr. Amber Chan on the 26th of September, I met with him and Mr. Morris Ho. And Mr. Chang, during the meeting, played a sound tape to me. As for this audio file, it's an excerpt of the excerpt that was broadcast online. Now, there was some quotes in the recording, and also it involved the employment of a program host at another radio station, and now she is still holding her program at another radio station. I have been keeping a close eye on the progress of the DBC incident, and I'm not willing to see what's happening to DBC today. And the government should insist on its principles. It should not set a precedent like this, that is to interfere with the internal affairs of broadcasters and companies. The OFCA has been looking at the relevant licensing conditions and trying to find out whether there are breaches to the conditions. Now DBC is broadcasting music and is replaying its old programs. We are trying to find out whether this is a breach of its licensing conditions. So with regard to this, I would like to ask Mr. Vincent Liu, the Deputy Director of the OFCA, and he'll be talking about such possible breaches. And later on, I'll be happy to answer your questions. Mr. Liu? As for the CE in Council, in March 2011, issued DAB licenses to DBC, Metro, and Phoenix U. According to licensing conditions, DBC should, after the grant of the license, within 18 months, that is before on the 21st of September this year, officially commence its service. And in the first year of its service, it would have to provide 7 channels, and these 7 channels would have to be broadcast for 24 hours a day. As for these 7 channels, they will include 1 talk radio channel, an ethnic minorities channel, and 5 other channels. And DBC in August last year soft launched its programs, and at the end of July, the press has been reporting that there were disputes among its shareholders. However, at the end of August, DBC informed our office saying that it will comply with the licensing conditions, and on the 21st of September, it will officially commence its 7 channels. And in early September, it also paid about $3.8 million as its annual license fee. And on the 21st of September, it officially commenced the broadcast of the 7 channels. And on the 10th of October in the afternoon, we received a notification in writing from DBC. It states that at 8 a.m. that day, DBC will discontinue its broadcasting. So we are very concerned about that. And from that day onwards until now, we have been written repeatedly to DBC. And also we have been communicating with its interim receiver, asking them that they should comply with the relevant licensing conditions and the relevant conditions under the telecommunication ordinance, because if it discontinues its broadcast, it may be a breach of its licensing conditions. And now the OFCA is waiting for the reply from DBC's interim receiver. And later on, according to all this information, we will look at whether there is a case of breach. And there may be administrative penalty, financial penalty, or the suspension of license. And also, ever since last September, that is 21st of October onwards, the 7 channels of DBC started to broadcast music only, and this is violating its relevant licensing conditions, because it is stated in its license that there must be a talk radio channel and an ethnic minorities channel. We have asked the DBC's interim receiver to give us a reply and explanation, and its interim receiver gave us a letter yesterday, and it's applied that from the 21st of October onwards, it will be. I hope that it can be allowed to broadcast music only, because it has to resolve its capital problem. So with regard to this application, later on the OFCA will have a discussion. With regard to shareholder disputes, I would like to point out that according to the present law and the licensing regulations, we are targeting the licensee itself and its program standards. So at the moment, we do not have any rules tackling disputes among shareholders, for example, concerning employment of people and capital injection. The OFCA has always respected the independent operations of licensees, and we will not interfere with their internal affairs. Maybe later on, Mr. Vincent Liu can answer members' questions. Now, we have a very tight schedule, and each councillor would have 5 minutes. I do not know how many members will raise questions, and this meeting would have to be adjourned at 11. Well, it can only be extended by 15 minutes at most, and we have to hold another meeting if we cannot finish our discussion. And also we have to deal with Mr. Albert Chan's motion. Well, can I get the written statements from Mr. Gregory So and Mr. Vincent Liu? Well, there are relevant documents labeled. Secretary, for your speech, do you have it in writing? Yes, that can be distributed to members. Now let us invite Mr. Albert Chang to speak. 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Members. I really cannot agree with the government officials' remarks. I think they have distorted the concept. We are talking about radio station. We are not a noodle shop, and we are not a cosmetic company. Lately, DL is involved in a fatal accident. And the Secretary, Dr. Goh, said that he's very concerned about consumers' interests. But for Mr. Grexo, he is indifferent to the collapse of a radio station. We have never asked the government to intervene. Well, Mr. Mok said that this is not a word to be used. We just asked the government to shoulder its responsibility. Now, this is a licensee. Now, why do radio stations have to be licensed? It is because they are making use of the airwave. And airwave is the same as a highway or a water main. That's why you need a license. We are not asking the government to inject funds, and we are not asking the government to rescue us, and we are not asking the government to handle our disputes. We just ask the government to look at the relevant licensing conditions and regulate. Now, if there are disputes among shareholders, no matter whether it's of a political nature or of any other nature, or maybe it's just because I'm not doing a good job, that doesn't matter. The most important thing is that if the licensee does not comply with the licensing conditions, and if the service for the public is affected, then the government should intervene. That is, I don't know, I don't care what your dispute is. You have to tell me how come you are discontinuing your service. How come you are not abiding by the law? How come you're not providing service to the public? Now, this is my request. I have never asked the government to give us money. I have never asked the government to handle our disputes, and I have not asked Mr. Gregory So to do all this. Now, Mr. Gregory So said that he will not be a commercial mediator. If he's a commercial mediator, of course he will not be sitting here today. DBC is a licensee. It's not like other newspapers. Anybody can publish a newspaper today. Why do we need a license? Why does this license have to be vetted by the government? We spent 4 years for the application. Now, the government would have to look at our capability, our program content, our capital, etc. So if the service is suspended, then it's just like a franchise bus company suspends its service. That's no difference. And I don't think the director of transport will say that. So if there's no city bus and then there are other bus companies, he will not say that. So, and if there is a blackout, then the government would not say that. Well, if CLP cannot provide power, then HEC can provide power, or you can buy a torch. Mr. Gregory So, I think you really have to discharge your duty. Now, I can only speak on behalf of the audience because I cannot speak on behalf of DBC now because now it's under receivership. The audience would ask, now I have bought this radio set. I have the right to choose. Now, don't tell me that you can listen to RTHK or the commercial radio, because if I want to take the MTR, you don't ask me to take buses or taxis. There's no such a choice. And I would like to thank Paul Chair for reminding me, because I'm bound by the injunction. and there are many things that I cannot say. So if you want to listen to me, maybe you should form a select committee, then I would have the privilege to speak my mind. I would like to read out an article. Now, the BBC has started broadcast for a very short time and is highly popular among the audience. In Australia, we have a member of the audience. His name is Shiwa. He's written an article for the Hong Kong Economic Journal.
Once I heard the traffic news from BBC, immediately I would set down everything and then I would listen intensely and watch the TV screen. This guy is really very interesting and funny, and his voice is very nice, but then whatever he says is very interesting, and the traffic news as reported by him would be really very interesting and funny. And whatever he, even if he's just reporting traffic news, he would also be making remarks about what's happening in the political arena. And the way he's reporting traffic news, he would also be very sarcastic, and he would also be mixing the political developments with traffic news. But then now that the radio station has to close down, and I have to part with this guy called Tong, and apparently it's been alleged that the corporation is not doing its business properly. But then would you be doing business that way? And if you're asked by a shareholder to sell off your shares, then would you not agree to that? And also, if you're very ambitious, then would you not try your best to try to turn it around so that the business would be revived, and you would have bought up the shares if you think that the other party is not doing his job? Then would you be saying that, well, I would not be selling you my shares and you're actually damaging yourself? So why is it that you're not willing to sell or you're not willing to buy the shares, and you're not even willing to sign the check, the paychecks for the staff and employees? And so actually you're actually using your own money to kick out Albert Chang, and economically or financially you're not going to benefit at all. So would you be doing that? Would you be that stupid? And actually you're talking about celebrities in a community, whether it's Arthur Lee or David Lee. So can that be a dispute amongst the shareholders? And if you say that the closure or collapse of DBC is a commercial dispute, then I think this is the pioneering Art Deco performance. And Gregory So, according to the Minghao Daily's report on the 18th of July, even if it's just a radio station's dispute, the secretary for the bureau should have this responsibility. And he also interfered with the broadcasting or live broadcast of the Olympics. We have never seen such an official serving the community in that manner. Well, today we need you to mediate in the dispute, and yet Gregory, so when Hong Kong people need you most, but then where are you? End of quote. All right, you have exceeded your time schedule by 2.5 minutes. I'll not be deducting that from Maurice Ho, so please do not overrun on the time given to you, Mr. Maurice Ho. I'd also like to take the opportunity to clarify something. All right, DBC is now under receivership, and the scope of such receivership would also include the day-to-day operation and also the management and also decision-making. All these would be in the hands of the receivers. So in what capacity should I be speaking here? Well, you're a former shareholder. I'm still an incumbent shareholder, but then you're no longer in the management of the corporation. All right, you are a former shareholder of DBC. Thank you, Chairman. I have this conviction. Members, well, we have to take a wrong path, and that's the very reason why I was one of the founding members of DBC. Well, many years ago when Apple Daily was founded, well, it was excluded by other news agencies, and I tried to approach 7-Eleven and other convenience stores to ensure that Apple Daily can be circulated. And on that occasion, I also approached electrical members to find out why Apple Daily was being excluded by those in the industry. And on that occasion, those from the trade were also very cold to Apple Daily, and Apple Daily was actually cold-shouldered by those in the same industry. And 15 years down the road, as somebody from the media sector, I find what's happening to DBC really very chilling. And here I can tell you categorically that DBC is viable. And it's not just my own belief, my colleagues also believe in it. The most important thing is we are talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of audience who also believe that DBC is viable, because during the 3-day voluntary broadcasting and 3-day sit-in, there were tens of thousands of audience coming to the CGO to join the sit-in, and they would very much like to meet the program host. Many of them live in remote areas, and many of them are elders, and they do not have money to browse the internet, and the only enjoyment or entertainment that they can have during their twilight years is to listen to the radio. And also there are some blind audience. They are not able to watch TV, and they are not able to read newspapers, and radio become the only channel or medium that they will be able to have access to the world and have access to information. And many of them just came to the government secretariat for the first time, and they did just come for a while. They would be sitting in for the whole day from morning till dawn, from morning till evening, and the only thing that they would hear was to meet with the program host, because Mak Xuan Mak Yan Shao, Ma Xiu Kang, Lau Lam Kwong, and other program hosts, and Lau Lam Kwong has had this hunger strike for 132 hours, and he would very much like to meet with Bureau Secretary and another program host, Tan Wai Yip, Ho Hoi Ting, Ho Xiu Lun, So Man Fong, Sai Lei Mui, and so on. Xiu Chia Chan Yong, Asa Wong Wai Man, A Tong, Xiu Ma Kai Chi, Ji Sam, Chen Ka Fu, Lam Yuk Hua, and so on. They are not, to them, they are not just program hosts, they are their friends. They are these audiences' friends. And they were here to show their support for their friends. And the message is clear. And the message to you is that DBC is not just doing a good job, it's very remarkable. They think they should support it, and therefore they travel a long distance in order to show their support for DBC. And why has DBC succeeded? And that's and the only thing is telling the truth, and that's what has been lost in our airwaves for a long time. And we are a very materialistic society, and being true to everybody, that's what DBC is for. And there is a growing audience in Hong Kong, because many people would like to hear the truth. They don't want to hear sophistry. They don't want to hear lies. And for a media agency to be successful, we will have to see if it can change our habit. I think DBC is doing precisely that, because it has attracted people who are willing to listen or tune in from morning to night. And one of my audience told me that DBC has changed his or her habit, because she will have to go to the market to do her shopping and be back by 4 p.m. because she would like to tune into one of our programs. It doesn't just happen to Mrs. Chiang Tong Chou's wife. It is also happening to many of our audience. All right, time's up. Next, Mr. Peter Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman, for reminding us that our remarks would not be covered by the electoral powers and privileges ordinance. But then, if my remarks are offensive, then I'll be willing to take up responsibility. And I'd like to formally and seriously condemn Greg So, the Bureau Director, well, to be modest, you are totally callous, and to be rather rude, or to be blunt to you, you're actually inhuman. Well, my colleague Lau Lam Kwong has been on hunger strike for such a long time, and all he's asking is to shake hands with you. So is it that he is infected with infectious disease that would mean that you will disappear from this world, or you'll be infected as well? So why is it that you're doing this? All right, your responsibility is to monitor or regulate digital broadcasting services. But then I'd like to ask you, all right, DBC is a digital radio station, and it's offering 7 channels, and for the others, they are actually still making the preparation. You don't know when such service will be available. So how is it that you're doing your job? How can you just leave everything to the OFCA? the Office of the Communications Authority. What I'd like to tell you is that I've repeatedly told the media, and of course for the mainstream media, they would be cold-shouldering us. But then, Mr. So and your colleagues, have you heard this? Well, back in 1978, I was one of the staff representatives of the then TV station that collapsed, and on that occasion, a very complete report was prepared, and the shareholders and also directors of the TV station were condemned and reprimanded for not doing their jobs. So have you read the report? Do you have to make reference to the report? Should you have done something about this? All right, I'm glad that you have openly admitted that you've actually listened to part of the recordings and also the clips, and you said that it's just part of the clips, and there was a voice citing or quoting anybody's remarks. But then have you tried to find out what's happened? So how can you be the bureau director? How can you claim that you have already done your job? Of course, I'm not supposed to lecture you on how you should be doing your job, but then you are not competent at all. How can you take the lead in formulating policy, and how can you be the head of the Communications Authority? Well, in the civic square, you did not make any remarks, so you're actually totally useless. Chairman, please ask the attendant to respect the rules of procedure. All right, please do not shout and yell like Raymond Wong. And also for attendees to the meeting, please do not use insulting remarks. But then as a member, I would sometimes like to do that, but well, for people, some of them actually would attract such remarks. But then as chairman, I cannot possibly say that. Well, we are talking about some 300 people who might have a livelihood problem, and I'd like to take the opportunity to condemn the Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Mr. Matthew Chow. He was on one of our programs discussing other issues. He just made some casual remarks saying that the Labour Department had a role to play too. But then why has he not done anything? And actually, we saw an establishment with several dozen workers who lost their jobs, and then they would be staging this show, and then they would do this registration for them. Well, we're talking about some 300 plus employees who would be losing their job. How come you have not done anything at all? So for broadcasting services, actually we are actually inferior to an eating establishment. I don't know what's in the mind of the officials. Once again, I'd like to say this to you. Well, for the audio recordings, it's not a secret recording. It's like what you've been doing today. So you have recordings to assist the secretary to do to prepare the minutes. And as you stated, there will be transcript of the meeting, including the offensive remarks that I made against the bureau director. Well, every word will be transcribed. So in many companies, they will also have a tape recording or audio recordings in order to facilitate the preparation of the minutes of the meeting. So what's the secret about this? And my colleague Lai Chak-fun would also be sharing with you the sentiments of some of our colleagues. Well, I'm not going to talk about high-sounding ideas or concepts, but then how come we are talking about some 300 families whose livelihood is going to be affected, and yet the administration is doing nothing at all about it? Thank you, Chairman. Next, Lai Chak-fun, Mr. Lai Chak-fun, Chairman. Just now, I heard Mr. Gregory So and OFCA's officials making their opening statement. I think it's very easy being an accountability official, and being their boss, C.Y. Leung, would have an easy time. So once again, I'd like to say that you're completely useless. Chairman, for those in the public gallery, the reason is simple. Chairman, can you make a ruling? That is, if attendees make offensive remarks or make disrespectful remarks against officials, can you make a ruling? Well, Mr. Lai, can you be more careful about your remarks? Well, the reason is very simple. For the for the principal officials, they said that they would have to wait for a report to be compiled before they would take action. All right, are you blind? Are you deaf? Well, this has been happening for months. So you have eyes and you have ears. You should have been able to read the newspapers. You should have been able to hear it yourself. And under the telecommunications ordinance, you should have revoked my license because I'm not complying with the licensing conditions. And you're telling me that under another piece of legislation, you do not have to regulate the shareholders because they've made certain commitments and they do not have to honor their promise. All right, I can also claim that I can invest $6 billion, and then all of a sudden I would just withhold the money, and then that's it. So what kind of administration is this? Is that so easy to issue a license? And also, as an employee of the corporation, I can tell you that we are very angry, and the reason that we are very angry, that's because we think that the management, whatever the dispute might be, whatever the reason behind that, well, it could be political suppression. They have not discharged their duty. They have not taken up their responsibility. And as employees, we were aware of the problems as early as July, because in July there was a board meeting saying that they were no longer prepared to inject, because initially they promised to inject $50 million so that we would be able to operate until the end of next year.
And I believe that will have a balanced book by that time. However, a decision was made at a board meeting, and it said that only $10 million are left in a company. And they decide to send us away, and the last day of our work was decided to be on the 10th of September. However, on the 11th of September, according to my agreements, I was dismissed, and then I became a mere service provider, and I was paid on a per program basis. So the conditions were different from other employees. But why was I willing to continue to work for the radio? Because this radio has been so popular, we do not want it to disappear. So that's why we have been working till the 30th of September. However, the shareholders still refused to inject money. And originally, we planned to have a rally on the 11th, and on the 30th of September, we had a countdown of 100 hours. And at the last moment, Mr. Bill Wong and the other shareholders asked us to stop. They said that they wanted a few days more for meetings, and that brought us some hope. And we were willing to continue. However, on the 9th of October, some shareholders said that there was not a 7-day notification, and the meeting was aborted. So we had to organize a voluntary broadcasting campaign for 7 days. Well, I objected to our continuous efforts, because after repeated discontinuation and resumption of broadcast, people would think that we were playing games. And for the voluntary broadcast, I think the government must face this squarely. We are not asking the government to give us money or to intervene in our disputes. So it's just like ATV. There are disputes among its shareholders, and ATV has been losing money all the time. So if ATV suddenly suspends its service today, Mr. Grexel, will you do something? Or will you just tell people that they can watch TVB or cable TV or Now TV? I won't believe you would do that. We are all licensees. Why are you treating us differently? What kind of policy is that? Well, you're at such a level. How can you be a government official? Our employees are going on hunger strike, and you have never paid a visit to them. Are you still a human being? Mr. Ma Yun-sao? I really wanted to be a counselor myself. I hope one day I can be that. Well, you're even greater than a counselor. Well, I was not prepared to speak. However, I hope that the secretary can really look at this. Well, there are other voices at DBC other than that of Mr. Albert Chang's. Many young people and many elderly really like to listen to radio. Well, a lot of elders cry to me. They say that they cannot speak at night. I'm very unhappy. I have already reached my retirement age. And even though I have to leave my family to work at night, I am willing to do so to accompany these people. Well, I would like to tell the councillors that this is not interfering with the internal affairs of the DBC. This is something important. I hope you can also listen to the people's voices. They really need our broadcasts. Well, there are several members who would like to ask questions. Well, what? Point of order? Well, the secretary interrupted the representatives' speeches twice, and that's about the rules of procedures. But the rules of procedures are just for councillors. They are not for our guests. And also for Rule 41, bracket 4. Well, let her speak. According to Rule 41, bracket 4, actually it only minds a member's remarks if these remarks are offensive. So the secretary, please do not tell us that you are hurt psychologically. Well, I also hope that for the attendees of this meeting, please be more careful. Well, there will be arguments today. On my left-hand side, they are very experienced people in mass media. So, Secretary, no matter whether you are lucky or not, you have to face this today. What? Chairman, I hope you can clarify. Now, for all the people who are attending today's meeting, including those in the public gallery and including our guests who are sitting here, are they bound by our rules? Well, we have our rules of procedures. The rules are to govern people so that meetings can be conducted smoothly. For Ms. Sit Ho's remarks, I find them really strange. Well, we have limited time. Now my judgment is that we continue with our meeting. You haven't made a clarification, Chairman. What clarification? Mr. Hon Kin-kee, I would like to clarify this. I will try to be as lenient as possible so that all of you can speak. But it doesn't mean that there can be no rules. Well, you have expressed your views. Now our meeting will have to end at 11:15. Many people are lining up to ask questions. Let me read out their names. James To, Memley Lau, Hon Kong, Mr. Frederick FUNG, Sit Ho, Ronnie Tong, Paul Chair, Lo Wai Kwok. Who else? Chang, when are you going to speak? And Chang? Well, there are so many victims here. Stop. I just asked you whether you're going to speak. You just tell me yes, okay? Five minutes each, but we don't have enough time for that. And there is not a second round for questions unless we hold another meeting. Mr. Mok says that we should hold another meeting. Later on, we will have to handle Mr. Albert Chan's motion. Well, maybe we should handle it now. Otherwise, we may not have enough time later on. Mr. Albert Chan suggests that we set up a select committee. Now, I would like to ask members' views. Okay, each member is allowed to speak for 1 minute only. Let's handle this first. Well, when they speak, maybe they should express their views. Well, maybe we should leave a few minutes time at the end of the meeting so that we can vote. Okay, I put this forward to you because he has written a letter to me. So when you speak, you can also tell us your stance. And then we will leave a few minutes towards the end of the meeting to vote. Mr. Albert Chan, Chairman, I would like to ask the Secretary. Now this is about DBC. And it's not just a commercial dispute. If it is just a commercial dispute, of course, the Secretary does not have to get involved. However, this is about the suspension of a radio service. And this may involve political interference and the liaison and China's liaison office in Hong Kong. It's a very serious issue. So for broadcasting policy, I believe any secretary who has political knowledge would not allow a political institution like the liaison office to intervene politically in the survival of a radio station. Now, the secretary said that he has listened to the leaked tape. And it is rumored that numerous letters have been sent to the relevant body asking why the service is suspended. But Mr. Grexel, as a bureau director, how can he just fold his hands while a licensee is involved in such an incident? Mr. Grexel? Well, I have repeatedly said this. When it comes to DAB service, the government has been making effort to promote it. I'm asking you about political interference. Don't take us down the garden path. Aren't you folding your arms while this is happening? So how about political interference? Are you turning a blind eye to it? I would like to reiterate that the government would not interfere in licensees' businesses. Chairman, I want to answer this question. Mr. Albert Chan, let him answer the question first. The government respects the freedom of speech. Hong Kong is a place where there is freedom of speech. Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm talking about political interference. That is totally different from speech freedom. Now the liaison office asked the directors, asked the shareholders not to inject funds. Now you have to answer my question. You should not take us down the garden path. You are being paid $200,000 a month. That's more than that. Over $300,000. And you are taking us down the garden path. Do you want to be a gardener? Please stop, Mr. Albert Chan. For each licensee, it has its freedom when it comes to its editorial arrangement, and it can enjoy editorial autonomy. Well, I think the secretary is totally useless. Well, do you understand my question? Well, please give me a chance to explain. Well, listen to me. Stop. Well, Mr. Albert Chan's question is very clear. Now it is alleged that there is political interference from the liaison office. So why don't you answer this question? Chairman, it's very simple. Or one, you can deny it. You can say that you've looked into it and it's not the case. But when it comes to political interference, okay, the secretary wants to answer this question. Mr. Albert Chan, please let him answer. Well, for OFCA, it has formulated a code of practice for radio stations, and that's targeting radio programs. And beforehand, we would not censor any programs. So I'm not talking about code of practice. I'm talking about capital injection from shareholders. You're not answering my questions. For licensees, well, you totally do not understand my questions. If you don't understand my question, how can you be the bureau director? Mr. Albert Chan. The secretary, please continue. For those people upstairs, please keep quiet. Well, secretary, please don't talk about the code of practice. Just say yes or no. Have you investigated? There's no political interference. Answer my question. You don't know how to answer a question. How can you be a bureau head? Well, Chairman. Well, about political interference and government's role. Well, individuals can enjoy freedom of speech, and the licensees and shareholders, they enjoy the same right. As for licensee management, they should listen to views, and no matter whether they agree to such views, they can decide on their own positions. no matter whether we agree to such positions. Well, Secretary, please wait. You can answer later. Mr. James Toll. Chairman, I've been listening a lot to radio, to a lot of remarks. Well, somebody would say that, well, that's just no radio programs. Do you really have to be that angry? Well, Chairman, I'm very concerned about political interference. Just now the Secretary said that he would not interfere with the internal affairs of radio stations. So if there is an external force, if the external force is a political force that affects the broadcast of a licensee, is our Secretary not concerned? He insists on non-interference. So is investigation not needed? Does he want to find out more? After listening to the tape, he's not following up on the case.
Second, the Bureau Director said that, well, he can see that, all right, the service has to be suspended, and that's not what the administration would have liked to see. End of quote. Well, frankly, even if it's just a fireworks display during the Lunar New Year, if there was no sponsor or no sponsorship, then the administration would have taken it very seriously. Now we're talking about a radio broadcaster. It's about public airwaves, and it's about the denial of the public of a choice. All right, if you just say that it's an internal affair, and between this and government interference, there is a lot of room to maneuver, as your boss has said. So you should be concerned about this, and you should find out more about this. So, can you just do something about the injection of funds in order to meet the licensing conditions? Can you just say that, well, for individual shareholders or directors, dispute is none of your concern? All right, the wider audience are concerned that I'm now denied of this opportunity to tune into this radio station, and on the face of it, there is political interference resulting in the public's deprivation of a choice. So is it that the administration has not got a role to play at all? So I'd like to listen to his reply. What's your question? All right, there is one fewer choice by the public. There is a suspension of service, and on the face of it, there is a prima facie case of political interference resulting in the public being deprived of a choice. And this is a public airwave. This is a public interest. So can the administration just say that, well, he can just rely on this statement, and then that's the end of the story? Bureau Director, when I referred to the code of practice, the reason was that for a licensed broadcaster, it will have to be held responsible for its editorial policy, and it can listen to different views. There might be criticisms, some might be praises, and for such views or comments given to them, the broadcaster itself can decide whether or not it can adopt those views, and such positions would also not constitute a ground for the administration to interfere with the internal operation of a broadcaster. That's very important. Well, amongst the shareholders, if they have a dispute, of course, that is not what the administration would like to see. But then to ask the administration to interfere with such operations, that would set a very dangerous precedent. In this regard, well, we have already done our best in promoting the launching of digital audio broadcasting services, but then with regard to the licensee's internal operation, we must not interfere with it, including the shareholders' disputes. We must not interfere. This is a line that we have to hold on. So, Chairman, is the administration telling us that the SAR government is not interfering, but then it would allow the liaison office to interfere? Another point that I'd like to make is with regard to the shareholders' litigation, as the conditions have not been complied with. So would you be revoking the license? I'm taking this very seriously, Chairman, because if amongst the shareholders, if at the end of the day, if the dispute can be resolved, whether in the court or outside court, but then in the process, if the administration has already revoked the license, then the public will have one fewer choice. Of course, you can say that you can always reissue the license, but then many audience are very used to tuning into the radio already, including myself. Bureau Director. Chairman, in fact, I am of the view that well, there might be a comment, there might be a stance asking the administration to interfere with a licensee's internal operation. Then tomorrow, you can come up with another stance. You might have another view asking the administration to interfere with the operation of another licensee. That would set a very dangerous precedent. Well, silence, please. Order, order. We have a whole hour to discuss this, and Mr. Greg So continues to be the human tape recorder. Well, you will all have a chance to ask follow-up questions. Please, please, while other members are speaking, please do not interrupt. Next, Ms. Emily Lau. Thank you, Chairman. Today we have this meeting, and one of the reasons is we would like to respond to the aspiration of a community, and we'd like to help DBC to revive the station. And we would also like the parties to assist this council in looking into this. Just now, Mr. Maurice Ho also referred to 1995, when Apple Daily was first launched, and nobody was willing to do the distribution for it. And he approached this council for a discussion, and I was also one of the members who suggested that we should discuss the issue. And because of that, I was subject to attacks by its enemies for many years, and today they would continue this attack. They would say that for people from the same industry, they're like enemies. I am somebody who also came from this sector. I hope that they would not adopt such a narrow view of it. And DBC has not been widely reported in the media. But then I hope that the media would understand this. That is number one, the public would like to have more choices. They would like to see more competition. And this incident involves somebody using the public airwaves, and they have been licensed, and there are interferences from different sectors, and as a result they are not able to provide such broadcasting services, and many people have been affected. That's why just now Taipan or Albert Chang said that if there is a suspension of power supply or water supply, and also a suspension of a bus route service. So he likened this to those services. Now there is concern from the public, and also together it's been alleged that the Chinese liaison office has been interfering. So the administration must try to look into it. And as Mr. Peter Lam just said, some 300 families' livelihood would be affected, and there are many audience who would also be affected. And therefore, as lawmakers, we think that this incident is absolutely something that the administration must look into. I'm not asking you to interfere with their operation, but then you will have to find out how come after the license has been issued, how come this has happened. Do you agree with Albert Chang that it's like a bus service and also other services which have been affected, and the administration would always be very concerned about that? So whether there will be programs or there will be the broadcast of the Olympics, even if there might be shareholders or directors dispute, you would always be very concerned. All right, on this occasion, you've written time and again on this. So what is going to follow? So is it enough to just write letters to them? And just now, well, Mr. Liu from the OFCA said that yesterday the OFCA received a letter from the interim receiver saying that they would like to apply starting from the 21st of this month. Within a 60-day period, on these 7 channels, they will be repeating or replaying music and so on in order to meet with the conditions of the license. But then he said that OFCA would be discussing or deliberating on the applications. So can you tell us more about this? Is it that there might be a chance that it can be revived? So are you allowing them a chance so that it would be able to resume broadcasting? So I hope that you would understand this. That is for people who are tuning into their programs. There are many local audience and overseas audience, and they are of a view that on this incident, this is really a very serious incident. Well, many who were not used to listening to or tuning into DBC, on the other day I met somebody who said that he was not used to tuning into to DBC, but then he still decided to come. But then you're actually undermining this. So can you give an account to the public? Secretary, you have a minute. Chairman, 1 minute would not be enough because just how many questions have been put to me. Well, you will have more time later. Well, Mr. Chang, when he met with me in my office, I already made it very clear to him. Actually, we also hope that DBC would succeed. or else the administration would not have spent or used so many resources in issuing the license. Of course, we want DBC to succeed. Well, you will have to understand the questions of members, and of course lawmakers might be making their wrong views, but then subsequently they will always ask the question. For example, it's mentioned that with regard to the receiver of DBC, he has written to OFCA making this request that they be given some time in order to resolve the funding problem, because you cannot just allow it to continue indefinitely. That so many channels would just be playing music all the time. That would definitely be a breach of the conditions, right? Chairman, please allow me to answer the question. I'd like to invite my colleague from OFCA to explain the situation. Yes, Mr. Liu. Chairman, as I just said, under the licensing conditions, DBC would have to have 7 channels, and 2 would have to be sound broadcast, and of course for the others there can be music channels. And in the event that the licensee or the interim receiver, with regard to the 7 channels, with regard to the mix of them, if the receiver would like to make some adjustments or make some changes, then OFCA can deal with such applications. We can consider whether we are prepared to accept such requests, and therefore in the near future OFCA would be dealing with this application. So when do you mean? Is there a time frame? 3 days, 1 week, or 2 weeks? So what do you mean by the near future? So it's not acceptable to give an answer that way. So you will have to give us a specific time frame, 3 days, 2 weeks, or what? Well, we'll be holding a meeting shortly. Next, Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the incident involving DBC, on the face of it, we are concerned that the public should have more choices with regard to access to information. But then deep down, I think it's all about political suppression. There is such an allegation. I'd like to ask Mr. Albert Chang, with regard to the 2 audio recordings, I'd like to ascertain the date of such recordings. Was it May 2011 and in February 2012? Were those recordings made on those 2 days? As I said before the meeting, you can answer yes or no. It's just a yes or no answer. I don't know. I'm not capable of giving a yes or no answer. All right, you put this to him. That is the date for the dates for the 2 recordings, and you've also cited the dates. Chairman, as I said before the meeting, I am subject to the injunction, and for these issues, I am not in a position to answer the questions. Well, I could be imprisoned. I'm not, Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. All right, with regard to the 2 audio recordings, they have been leaked, and I think that's very horrible. Peter Lam, you're not subject to the injunction, right? All right, Peter Lam, can you answer the question? What do you want me to answer? All right, you have not been subject to the injunction. You're not bound by the injunction. All right, with regard to the 2 audio recordings, can you confirm if they were made in May 2011 and February 2012? I don't know. I was not a party. I was not in attendance at the board meeting in question. All right, thank you, Albert Chen, for your reminding. That helps. Well, for the 2 tape recordings that have been leaked, I think that's really very terrifying. All right, as Mr. Peter Lam said, all meetings are recorded, right? But then I think, well, whether such records should be made public, there is a principle to go by. For example, for minutes of this council's meeting or records of this council's meetings, they have to be made public. But then for internal meetings, whether they should be made public, there should be some principles to go by. The thing is, how come these are just extracts? Why have you not disclosed all the records of such meetings? Why have you chosen to just leak the extracts instead of the whole recording? Given the circumstances, I think in disclosing the records, have you got the consent of the participants of the meeting? Have you got their consent? And if that's the case, then honestly, I'm not Bill Wong. If I were a shareholder, I would be scared. All right, I had this private meeting, and I discussed things with you at a private meeting. Whatever my son's, such remarks could be disclosed to the public. Well, for people upstairs, please remain silent. Order, please. All right, when there is a dispute, you say that it's political suppression. But then when you ask me to join you and work with you, what are those? Okay. I think it's time for the administration to enforce the licensing conditions. In fact, the issue is simple. All right, internally, if you're able to give a clear account about what's happening in the account books after you have raised funds, well, what are the expenditure items? Well, I'm also a businessman. There is no reason why I should be spending money and use it to reclaim the seed. And if I, as a director, am not able to find out what's happening in the accounts, then why should I be bothered to invest further money into the business? So I'm just saying this as a businessman. So can you answer the question? With regard to Wong Ting Kwong's earlier comments concerning Albert Chang and Maurice Ho and also the management and also the shareholders' criticisms, we will have to allow them a chance to respond to those. All right, Albert Chang or Maurice, who would like to respond?
Well, Chairman, you know that I really would like to speak. However, due to the injunction, I cannot say so much. If you want to listen to the truth, please set up a select committee. Please support Mr. Albert Chan's motion. Well, for those in the public gallery, I have been very accommodating because I myself would make a lot of noise. But if you continue to be so noisy, it's very difficult for us to continue with the meeting. Please be cooperative. I don't want to drive you out. Now, if you support Mr. Albert Chan's motion, I believe you can get the truth from me. Otherwise, I can only ask Mr. Maurice Ho to answer. Mr. Maurice Ho is the CEO. He's looking into our books, so I'm not responsible for that. Mr. Ho, with regards to the accounting problem, actually I would like to do justice to our colleagues. In 2012, each month from January to June, each month we had a very clear financial statement, and that would be given to all our shareholders and directors. We did that every month. There had been no problems, and no questions was raised. Well, even though a question was raised, I would be very happy to answer that. And then in June, there was a dispute among shareholders, and then a lot of things happened. Firstly, a lot of people want to look at the books. From June to September, this chaos went on, and some accounting companies came to our office with a high-speed photocopier, and they copied almost all our records in the accounting department. So for such a long period of time, if you say that our accounting was not clear, I do not admit that. But they then got the books, and they still said that it's not clear. So it's just a way of expression. And I would like to explain about our accounts. Now, for the operation of a radio, I would like to tell you more about its background. As for RTHK, from 2012 to 2013, its budget is operating 7 channels. It has a budget of $233 million. And then for commercial radio, 3 channels, 2 FM, 1 AM. Their operating expense is $137 million. Metro, $117 million. And for DVC, when we started with the Wave Media Limited, we have been operating for 4 years. Within the past 4 years, we spent $150 million. From 2006 to March of 2011, we spent $26 million on infrastructure and operation. And then we had to build transmission towers. We had to build studios. We have 10 studios. All this would need money, and most of the money was put on capex. And we started to operate in August last year, and until June this year, we had to pay a total remuneration of $50 million. Well, some employees had a contract with an amount over $1 million, and there are less than 3 people who get this kind of contract. Mr. Lam Kwok-hong, Mr. Wong Ting-kong belongs to the DAB, and Mr. Greg So belongs to the DAB. And Wong Ting-kong has made a very good point. And now it is suspected that the liaison office is interfering. So it's like that the radio station is haunted by the liaison office. So, Mr. So, please answer me. Well, maybe you can say that DBC can take care of its own business. However, if the liaison office tell Bill Wong that it doesn't want a certain person to be a program host of DBC, then things have already changed. And for the DBC people, if they think that they should enjoy editorial autonomy and they do not agree to this, then things have changed. This is interference. Should you not be looking into it? There is a body called Liaison Office. And in Hong Kong, it's instructing a shareholder to do something. And now he's making use of the precious airwave. And that Mr. Lau actually accused me. Well, I applied for a license. He asked me, well, do you have the money? Do you have the capability to do this? I will not give you a license. I'm not targeting you, Mr. Liu. Now you have issued a license to a company, and you want this company to provide service to Hong Kong people so that Hong Kong people can listen to radio programs they like, or they can use this as a platform for their expression of views. They can enjoy the Fung Yin programs. But now you are turning your back to it. This is not just any commercial company. If it's just any commercial company, Mr. Liu would not do that to me. He asked me, do you have so many programs? Can you build so many transmission towers? So, Gregory So. Now, if you intervene in the broadcast of the Olympics, how come you cannot intervene in this? How about the Lehman Brothers incident? That was trading. But the LegCo spent 4 years in investigating the Lehman Brothers incident. How about the Hong Kong U incident as Chancellor? And CE and Lu Chang-on, all these. Well, Gregory So is now the secretary, and people say that he should be fair and just. We are giving you a chance, but you do not give a chance to yourself. You are an appointed official. In your portfolio, something very important involving the interests of the public is involved. Now you are issuing licenses, then you have to ensure that the licensees would make good use of the precious airwave. And this is not happening now. I won't call you are doing business. If you lose money, you would sell the company. You won't just dump the money into the sea, right? Are you the head of a listed company? If so, I would ask people not to buy the stocks of your company. So how can you fight a war like that? So if you talk about commercial operations, I think this is outrageous. And David Lee is in banking, and Arthur Lee just likes to play video games. So I think it's a waste of breath talking to you. Well, keep quiet. And I would like to speak on behalf of all the people in Hong Kong. I have to let you know what consequence it would be if you are a government official. And I will show you what digital broadcasting is. Well, please don't approach Mr. Sou's security guards. You are utterly useless. Leung Kwok-hong, go back to your seat. Yes, sir. Mr. Monaco, Chairman, I once worked for DBC as a program host. During its soft launch, I would like to thank the government for organizing this meeting in such a short time. I've heard the government officials, and I'm really disappointed. Before the 10th of October, it seems that the government hasn't done anything, and they were just concerned. And after the 10th of October, they started to do something because they've received letters from the DBC, and up to now they have sent 7 letters to DBC and its interim receiver. We think that the government is reacting very slowly. Now, I would like to look at the capital injection issue. Now, in the government's paper today, it is said that in early September, DBC paid $3.8 million to OFTA as the annual license fee, and then it launched 7 channels. And we were told this again today. So it seems that for the license fee, that problem has been resolved. But we've heard different stories. That is, the company doesn't have money to pay its employees. And when we look at condition 32 of the licensing condition, it says that a licensee shall implement the 6-year investment plan submitted in its license application. And now a report has not been sent to the OFCA yet because it's not yet a year. So can the OFCA tell us? The licensee would have to submit a report annually. And if before that annual report, even though there's reports in the press, even though the management says that it will only broadcast for another 100 hours, you would not look into the matter, you would just ignore it. And up to now, what has OFCA done concerning this? What is OFCA's view? As to DBC, whether it has breached its licensing conditions, for example, that's concerning its investment requirement, etc. Has that already happened? Just now, Taipans talked about interference. I do not like to use the word interference. It seems that the government wants to intervene. But just now, we talked about the broadcast of the Olympics, and actually that's even more commercial, because in the licensing conditions, you have not asked these TV stations to broadcast such popular sports programs. So for OFCA, it has to discharge its duty as a regulator. And it is said that because this is not the only DAB operator, and there are other choices, and I think this is really unacceptable and strange. And I would like to state my position as well. Concerning the formation of the Select Committee. My view is that, actually I've written a letter to the chairman. I said that I hope a public hearing be conducted because many members of the public have a lot of views concerning DBC. I've also received a lot of emails and letters concerning this. I think a public hearing should be convened, and we should listen to the people first. As to whether a select committee should be established, if the government officials cannot answer our questions satisfactorily today, I think that is something we should do. Well, later on, we will look at that. Now it's already 10:30, and our meeting will be adjourned at 11. I can extend it by 15 minutes. In other words, we still have 45 minutes. And now there are still a number of people who are in line, 8 of them actually.
5分鐘咧。
So by allowing them each to speak for 5 minutes, and that would take us 40 minutes. So who else would like to speak? I'll have to draw a line somewhere. All right, Christopher Jung, your name has been registered, so I'll have to draw a line there. And then we will have to set aside 5 minutes to deal with the motion moved by Mr. Albert Chan. I'm sure the only thing that we can do is to put this to the vote, whether you are for or against. As to whether or not we should be holding a public hearing, all right, after today's meeting, if you're all of the view that the incident is far from over and you have not been able to get a satisfactory progress or reply, then I'll be prepared to hold this public hearing. We will also have to consider which parties should be invited to the public hearing, and I might need to consult you, members. Now it's Ms. Claudia Mo's turn. I think you will have to answer Mr. Mok Lai Kwang's question. It's about the issue of investment. So have they already breached the investment requirement under the license? Yes, Chairman, I would also like to have the opportunity to respond to some of these questions because many questions have been asked. All right, please do not spend all the 5 minutes to express your views. Yes, Bureau Director, on the issue of broadcasting of the Olympics. It's about the communication between different organizations, but then on this occasion, it's about the internal operation of a media organization, and therefore the two issues are very different. We will not be interfering with the internal operation of broadcaster. Next, about injection of funds. Yes, Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Sorry, it's Claudia Mo. All right, now that I know what's meant by sophistry, Mr. So, I think Lau Nam Kwong is still upstairs. He's not feeling well, and he has already gone downstairs. All right, he's one of the hunger strikers, and he asked that you pay a visit to him, and this is a very simple request, and it's very modest. I hope that you will listen to it, and you will also do it. Next, I'd also like to answer the question raised by Mr. Wong Teng Kwong. He's not here. All right, Mr. Wong Teng Kwong said that these are private board meetings, and you're having tape recordings, and also you're disclosing them at will. I don't know who has leaked that, but then in a modern society, the right to know by the public is very important. And there is one thing called public interest, and their board meetings, if what transpires at their board meetings involve public interest, is about the use of public airwaves. Too bad Mr. Wong Teng Kwong is not here. I'm not able to look into his eyes and make these remarks. What if the what happened at a board meeting involves or affects public interest, then there is the right that the public has the right to know. And also in the tape recordings, there's this remark saying that Li Wailing is very provocative. I've also talked to Officer Pang, is Mr. Pang from the liaison office, and the Chinese liaison office finds that very offensive. It's very upset by this. All right, Mr. Greg, so you've heard it. You've confirmed that you've heard it. All right, as an ordinary man, you think that it's just a dispute between the shareholders, and there is no suspicion that they are actually turning the broadcaster red, and you're still saying that this is not political interference, and you're still insisting that this is just a commercial dispute. All right, Bureau Director, you often like to quote these 8 words, and you say that under the law, we will be following the established procedures in dealing with this. And you've been making those remarks in dealing with the free terrestrial TV license. You've been insisting that this is just a commercial dispute, but then after listening to the tape, obviously there was an element of political interference, and still you are deaf to it, and you've turned a blind eye to it. Yes, of course, you can say that, all right, I have this argument that Albert Chang is not very popular, and therefore I suspect that there would not be many people who would rally behind him. All right, well, all right, you're saying that, all right, this is an incident and it has nothing to do with the people involved. And also in the market out there, you've also heard this saying that for the license of DBC, originally it was issued by Bowtie or Donald Tsang to his fan, and is supposed to be an official broadcaster which would be able to support Henry Tang, who should have become the chief executive. And now that Mr. Henry Tang has not been elected, and therefore is legitimate to kill it. So these are the remarks that have been floating that have been floated in the in the community. So would you be responding to that? In the end, this is a broadcaster, so we would only be looking at the consequences. We would not be looking at the purpose. You don't want to speculate on it. I don't want to speculate either. But then what is happening is that we have one fewer licensee. We have one less platform to air the people's voices. You might say that they can tune into other programs or other channels, but then the minimum requirement is that public should have the choice. And if you have choice, then you have the freedom. Originally, I should have one DBC as my choice, and now I have this one fewer choice. So how are you going to be accountable to the public? And all I'm asking you to do is to be accountable. You will have to be accountable to the public. Yes? Albert Chang? Sorry, I do not agree with what Claudia Mo just quoted. You quoted some rumors in the community saying that DBC would be the official broadcaster, and we will also be a fan of Donald Tsang. This is not true. This is not correct. I was just quoting some rumors in the community. All right, Claudia, you've already spent 4 minutes, you have spent over 4 minutes on this, and if the Bureau Director does not have the time to respond, then there will be no chance for him to speak. I think we have to be fair to the Bureau Director. If you're just expressing your views, yes, it's okay. You can use your own 5 minutes, but then it's not fair to the Bureau Director. You will have to leave him some time to answer the question. All right, he will just be using sophistry in answering questions, and therefore I don't want him to answer the question at all. Yes, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, I'll give him time to answer, Chairman. All right, the Secretary repeatedly said that he would not be interfering with the shareholders' dispute. That's an internal dispute, but then at least on the face of it, from the tape recording, we can see that after a liaison officer's official expressed his views to one of the shareholders, the shareholder concerned refused to inject money into the corporation. So clearly, this is no longer an issue of internal dispute. It already involves some external forces. Putting pressure to bear on the corporation is political suppression. So I'd like to know whether or not it has already gone beyond an internal dispute, and also where the administration has a responsibility to uphold the public interest by ensuring that public airwaves would be used for providing this service. So how are you able to ensure that the broadcaster would not be subject to the suppression by the Chinese Liaison Office, and you'll be doing something about it? Bureau Director? Well, I'm glad to have this chance to answer the question. When Albert Chang came to my office, allowing me to listen to the tape recording, well, originally I thought that there was this shareholders dispute, but then unfortunately this happened 17 months ago. It was about the hiring of a program host. So there was a gap of some 17 months. It has nothing to do with this funding injection, and therefore it's not for me to comment on the remarks made by certain person about other people's remarks. But then I'd just like to say that for Hong Kong media organizations, they have been very independent all along. And if an organization heard that there were criticisms against it, they should have been able to respond to those remarks independently, because they have different contexts for individual management, individual whatever they heard, they would be able to do whatever they think would be right as independent shareholders. And as I said, in the code of practice, they would be responsible for their wrong editorial policy. Mr. Sin, I'd like to follow up on this. He has not answered my question. All right. You will also have to answer the question raised by Mr. Mok Nai Kwong. As a principal official, what are you going to do? What have you done to ensure that Hong Kong's media organizations would not be subject to political suppression by the liaison office? So as an accountability official, what would you be doing? We have to be very careful. We should not interfere with the operation of the media organizations. This line is very clear. We will not be interfering with the internal operation of these organizations. As for licensees, they will have to take up this responsibility of formulating their own editorial policy. I'm sure media organizations are able to do it. I still have time left, Chairman. I think what is clear, there is a prima facie case that it has already gone beyond. It has already gone beyond an internal dispute amongst the shareholders. You have repeatedly said that you would not be interfering with an internal dispute of the shareholders, but then it has already gone beyond this an internal dispute of the shareholders. It's about the liaison office interference with the shareholders. So how are you going to resist? How are you going to protect Hong Kong's media organizations so that they would not be subject to Chinese liaison office interference? Well, as I said, the tape recording was about the hiring of a program host from another radio station, and that happened 17 months ago. It was a conversation that took place some 17 months ago, and now we are talking about a funding issue that happened 17 months later. And in between, shareholders already talk about in between, the shareholder already injected money into DBC, and there was already this soft launch, and it also paid up its licensing fee and so on. So the two are separate. So one is about hiring a program host 17 months ago, and then 17 months later, we are talking about funding injection. I think the two issues or incidents are separate. We will have to look at it more objectively. All right, even if the two are separate, all right, the Chinese liaison office is trying to interfere with the broadcaster's hiring of a program host. It is also interfering with the operation of a media organization. So as an accountability official, all right, the administration is not interfering, but then how are you going to protect Hong Kong's media organizations so that they will not be subject to political interference by other political forces? As an accountability official, I will have to ensure that we will be following the law and also the codes, and the code of practice makes it very clear that is for a broadcaster, a licensed broadcaster, it will have to take up its own editorial policy or responsibility, and we from the administration should not interfere. So it means that you are not able to protect Hong Kong's media organizations so that they will not be subject to the political interference by the liaison office. Is that right? Time's up. Next, Mr. K.K. Fung. Well, there are several situations, and I think that the administration should have used its regulatory powers to be concerned about this. I'm not talking about interference. So it should be concerned about the situation or what is happening to DBC. First, as many colleagues have said, is about the alleged interference by the liaison office trying to influence DBC as to whether a program host should be hired, and it was formally disclosed in the radio station. So you should at least have been concerned about this. You should not just say that, all right, it happened 17 months ago, and therefore you should not be concerned about this. Should that be your approach? Well, precisely, you will have to find out what actually happened, and then whether it would affect the broadcaster's provision of broadcasting services. And also, as a licensing authority, when you issue a license, you hope that the licensee would be able to operate, right? And after the incident was disclosed, you should at least be concerned about this. You should see what you can do to help, right? Well, there might be a possibility that the broadcaster will have to suspend its services. It might actually have to close down. So you should at least be concerned about this. And thirdly, obviously, they have already breached their licensing conditions. All right, they are only playing music on its channels. obviously this is not in compliance with the conditions. So you should at least find out. So have you followed the code of practice? And fourthly, at the time when you issue the license, there was a requirement for investment. Number one, you have to ensure that sufficient amount has been injected, and also there should be timely investment. You should be concerned about this. You should be regulating them. You should be ensuring them. You should be ensuring that they are doing this. They will have to provide the funding injection in accordance with the agreement, right? Well, for social enterprises seeking the administration's help, they would come in once every 3 months to look at our accounts, and if we fall below a certain level, I will be asked to go and give an explanation. And KK, why is it that your account is like that? And we will have to give an explanation to the administration, and we will have to tell them when we'll be able to settle the accounts. So I don't think they are interfering. I think they are helping. So as a big department, as a radio broadcaster, so you think that you do not have to interfere with them, you do not have to be concerned about this. So 5 questions altogether. All right, for social enterprises, you get government funding, and therefore it's somewhat different. So Bureau Director, please answer the questions raised by Mr. KK Fung. For Mr. KK Fung asks a host of a barrage of questions. I'll not be responding to them one by one. I'm very concerned about the issue or what is happening to DBC. That's why both myself and my colleagues have repeatedly contacted DBC. We are very concerned about this, but then for internal issues or events, we cannot interfere. And I hope that OFCA, my colleague from OFCA, can also talk about the funding injection issue.
Well, Mr. Frederick Fung's questions are very specific, but so far I've not heard a specific answer. So, Mr. Vincent Liu, can you answer in a more specific manner? I can talk about capital injection. Well, when DBC got the license, it has made a commitment concerning investments. That is, it will build infrastructure, and then it will also invest in programs. And after getting the license in the first 6 years, it would have a total investment amount to comply with. So from 2011 to 2017, we will have to regulate that total investment amount. And so we would monitor that, and we ask DBC to give us a management report on an annual basis, telling us what the investment amount in that year is, and if that actual investment amount deviates from or deviates significantly from its original investment plan, then we would ask DBC for an explanation. So is there a deviation now? Well, that is just to convenience our monitoring. That is to ensure that it can reach its targets in 6 years. But we do not require it to invest a certain amount this year. So now they are asking for help, and you are not concerned. Just now, Mr. Ho also said this. That is up to February this year. For DBC shareholders, capital investment is already up to $150 million. And that has already exceeded their projection for the first year. Mr. Lai Shak-fen wants to speak. Can I speak again? Otherwise, I would like to leave, because I think this meeting is really meaningless. Yes, you can leave. Mr. Ho? Well, Chairman, I have a very simple question, but I do not want the government officials to lead me down a garden path. Well, they say that this is not political suppression. They are saying that this is not a suppression of speech freedom. But if some board directors think that the liaison office finds it offending, and that's why they do not hire a certain program host, then can you explain to us the relationship among these parties? Why do you think that this is strictly commercial, not political? Chairman, I have already answered this question. And if the member wants me to say the same thing again, I'm willing to do that. I want the Secretary to tell me what's the commercial relationship between the liaison office and DBC if he thinks this is a commercial dispute. And what kind of a commercial relationship exists between the liaison office and the shareholders? Secretary, can you answer Ms. Sito's questions? I think this is really problematic. So can you answer this question? Well, according to the Code of Practice, a licensee should shoulder its editorial responsibility. So for the licensee staff, well, Secretary, let us make it simple. She asked you. Now there is a tape, and it disclosed that through Bill Wong, the liaison office interfered with the hiring of a certain program host, and they think this is political interference. So you can answer the question. You can say that one country, two systems, this has nothing to do with the liaison office. You are wasting our time. We have a lot of things to do. Secretary. Well, in the beginning, I already said that I would not comment on quotations from other parties. The Secretary always says that the SARG would uphold press freedom. And on the other hand, he also says that this is a commercial dispute. It has nothing to do with politics. But of course, we think this is political. At least the Secretary would have to tell us why he thinks this is a commercial dispute. I asked him how come he had such a judgment. Does he see a commercial relationship between the liaison office and the shareholders? Well, here are two issues. Chairman, please continue. Well, for people upstairs, please keep quiet. 17 months ago, there was this excerpt from a recording. It's about the hiring of a program host, and now we are talking about capital injection. And for capital injection, it's a dispute among shareholders, and this happens 17 months later. This is what's happening now, and this is a commercial problem. And if you are talking about 17 months ago, I do not want to comment on that. Mr. Ho, well, for that tape, I don't know whether it was recorded 17 months ago. Well, she has to leave. Well, Chairman, I don't know when this tape was recorded. I don't know why the Secretary knows it's recorded 17 months ago. So if we want to know more, then I think later on we should support that this panel invokes the powers and privileges ordinance so that we can set up a select committee. So when you vote later, please adhere to this position. Well, I do not know when this tape was recorded, but when Mr. Chen came to me, that's what he said. He told you that it's recorded 17 months ago. Yes, when he came to me and played the tape to me, he said that it was recorded in June last year. And when it's broadcast online, the caption said that it's May last year. Well, for such a senior official, he should be wise. If he's not certain about the online rumor, I'm sorry, I do not want to comment on the source of the tape. Well, when you speak, please note to the chairman. And when I call out your name, you can speak. You are not fighting with each other. Mr. Ronnie Tong, well, for what Longhair did just now, maybe it's too rough, but I totally agree with him. Well, the Secretary said that it's a commercial dispute. I've been handling commercial dispute for 40 years. I've never seen this. Well, that is, you are not selling something, you are not buying something, and you are not injecting funds, but you try your best to stop the operation of the company. I think the message is very simple. I think for children of 6 or 7 years old, they would already know this. That is, commercial dispute is just a disguise. It's just used to cover up a political issue. Well, the Secretary says that he would uphold speech freedom, and the government has a policy to promote a diversified broadcasting arrangement, etc. And he said that he has issued a number of letters demanding answers from the company, saying that DBC has already violated its licensing conditions. Well, this company does not want to violate licensing conditions, but if somebody is playing games, then it's forced to do so. For this so-called commercial dispute, now it's sub judice. And I would like to ask the Secretary a relatively simple question. Now it's sub judice, and we all know that this company does not intentionally violate its licensing condition. So, can you promise us that before the litigation is over, you will not penalize this company and you will not revoke the license? If you revoke the license, then actually you are indirectly supporting those people who are playing games, and that's the goal they want to achieve. I'm sorry, the speaker is speaking off mic. Now, if you make use of this meeting, I'm trying to get an answer from the government. I don't think that's right. Well, I have just declared my interest. If you think that I have violated our professional code, then you can sue me at the Bar Association. I'm sorry, the speaker is not coming through again. Well, Mr. Portier, please be patient, because we only have 20 minutes left. Well, you should make a judgment. Okay, I will answer you. Don't waste my time. I will make a judgment. Ronnie Tong, because you have given legal advice to Mr. Albert Chang, I have already said that I am speaking in the capacity of a legislator. It has nothing to do with my profession. And Mr. Ronnie Tong's speech is protected by the Powers and Privileges Ordinance. Well, now he assumes that someone's playing games. My judgment is that he can continue to ask questions. Chairman, I would like to answer this question. Well, Mr. Ronnie Tong has given legal advice to Mr. Albert Chang, and last Sunday, on the 21st of October, at the East Wing of CGO, when there was a broadcast, he said something, and I would like to quote it. He said that I am a lawyer, and I would like to clarify what the present situation is. This is a commercial dispute, and the government should not interfere with commercial disputes. And this is what he said. This is actually something internal. Well, the receiver has sent a letter to the OFCA and made an application. It says that from the 21st of October onwards, it hopes that it can be exempted for 6 months so that it can resolve the problem of 60 days, so that it can resolve the capital problem. And it is hoped that space can be given to the shareholders. As to people who are not willing to buy or sell, I think this is the commercial decision of the shareholders. Well, Chairman, can the Secretary undertakes that before the litigation is over, the license will not be revoked? We have to work in accordance with the law. If you look at the telecommunication ordinance, for the suspension and revocation of license, there are certain procedures to follow, so we have to follow the law. For example, if the company's situation changes, well, now it's 10:57. Before Mr. Portier speaks, we would have to handle Mr. Albert Chan's motion. We still have 3 members who would like to ask questions. We have 15 minutes left to them. So now let's deal with Mr. Albert Chan's motion. So if members do not object to Mr. Albert Chan's motion, then we would treat it as approved. If you want to vote on it, we can do that. Well, don't just take it that way. I'm very angry at you. I'm handling the case. Well, you have to read out the motion. Can you read? I'm talking to the chairman. Are you blind? Can you not read? Mr. Chung Shi-kan, can you speak slowly? There is a paper. It's written very clearly on the paper. And there is a time restriction when it comes to your speech. Now we are handling his motion. If you think there is no problem, then the motion is tabled and later on we will vote. Do you understand? So we will vote later if we all agree. That's simple. Any question? No? Mr. Ronnie Tong? I would like to clarify this. Well, can I vote? Well, I can only read out the rules. At the Legislative Council or any other panel or subcommittee meetings, councillors cannot vote if they are involved financially, unless this financial interest is enjoyed by everybody in Hong Kong, or unless this is about government policy. So you can make your own judgment. So please tell me openly. Well, you can make your own judgment. Everyone should have it. I don't have it. Well, if you don't have it, you have to ask your assistant. The paper number is CB 463-1213-01. We have to do it before 11. Yes, if we agree that we would handle this, then we can vote later. We are just talking about handling it. Yes, we agree. Okay, next. Mr. Porcher. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, I absolutely agree that in Hong Kong, freedom of speech is very important, and I've been advocating that there should be more channels and more licenses, whether it's a radio or TV licenses, so that there can be a blossoming of ideas and views. And then on this occasion, in this incident, I'd like to express the following views, and therefore I might not need the officials to respond. So I'll be using my own 5 minutes to express my views. And before this meeting, I received a lot of comments from the public. Members of the public are very concerned about this. It's not just about Mr. Albert Chang's the alleged suppression that has been exerted on Mr. Albert Chang. But then members of the public are indeed very concerned about this. Many of them are already used to tuning into DBC, and many have said that it's like Metro News. Well, there was a suspension or program host quit, and I was also one of the parties, and Pamela Peck was also the other guy, and I was also involved in that incident. And on this occasion, there was this request that we should set up a select committee to look into it. I have grave reservation about this, because on the face of it, for the evidence that we have gathered so far, number one, we only have the extracted tape recordings, and for the parties involved in the incident, if you have to identify a victim who is the subject of political suppression, I think is Mr. Bill Wong. For the other parties, they are just the third party or fourth party. They are not involved in the incident directly. And as we are all very familiar with this, for example, in Ken Lai Wai's case, that was in the last term, we only had the defendant, but then not the plaintiff. And on this occasion, apparently, we have taken advantage of the huge resources of this council, and we will be dealing with something that might not actually go to the court, because there was no complainant. There was the party involved had not made any complaint that he had been subject to political suppression, and therefore it's not right for us to set up this select committee unless we have further evidence giving us justification to set up this select committee to look into this case. And also we have this editorial. Well, for DBC, it was granted because of political reasons, and it also failed as a result of political reasons. And Donald Tsang, the former chief executive, before his term expired, he was involved in the so-called corruption scandal, and at the time, Bill Wong was it was said that Bill Wong should not have offered this luxury apartment to Donald Tsang, and he was then issued with this license. And Mr. Albert Chang, alleged to be Mr. Donald Tsang's fan, he was also issued this. He was issued with this license, and we all know the background of these people. And if you look at the political or commercial reasons, I agree with Mr. Ronnie Tong's point. That is, it doesn't make sense commercially. How come this shareholder is not willing to buy or sell the shares? But then Ms. Sit-ho, well, probably she doesn't have a lot of business experience. Well, sometimes it might not have been direct commercial interest. There might have been indirect commercial interest. Well, for these directors, they might have different They might have different business investment considerations. When I call this an abnormal fetus, it might have been the reason why DBC was granted the license. And Albert Chang, I've also declared interest because I was involved in a litigation or court case with Albert Chang. Well, we had to have a retrial, and I actually sued Mr. Albert Chang for $80,000 for damages because it was a libel case. But then there is a reason why I have to speak now. I'm looking at the incident rather than the individual concerned. All right, there might have been different dealings, but then for political reasons, directly or indirectly, the investor involved might have other thoughts. I think this is only legitimate. But then, unfortunately, yes, Mr. Albert Chang might have been working very hard to run this broadcasting station, but then it's embroiled in all these problems. I think it's disappointing to many people, and many staff have lost their jobs as a result of this dispute. How come we have totally ignored or disregarded the past political reasons? This is a big problem. And also, as many colleagues have said, well, there is public interest, and therefore we should play the tape. But then there might be overriding reasons. But then how come, assuming that the tape is true, then 17 months ago when the tape was recorded, before the investment or fund injection dispute arose, as a shareholder, they had a responsibility. They should not have recorded the meetings of the board, and they should not have disclosed it to the public. So I think this is a director's responsibility. All right, we would very much like to know what actually transpired, but then I don't think it's reasonable or is proper for a select committee to be set up for that purpose. All right, there was reference to Mr. Albert Chang, and therefore I'll be giving the floor to Mr. Albert Chang to clarify this. If it involves the injunction, please do not say anything about it. But then he referred to some personal disputes with you, and I think you will have to respond to that, right? I don't, because I'm bound by the injunction. But then for Paul Chair, if I know, all right, for Link Reed, I think it's the best example that I can cite. All right, Link Reed is also a monster. All right, it should not have been listed. It's not right. But then we should not say that. Let's forget about it. Well, to put it bluntly, let's say if there is an illegitimate child is born, and if it's born out of wedlock, and therefore we should not be looking after the illegitimate son. If it's subject to suppression, it's okay because it's born out of wedlock. All right, for blind dates and blind marriage, all right, the same applies. Paul Chan, all right. Next, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Chairman, I'm concerned about DBC. I'm concerned about its current operation. For how long can it last? Because according to information, the High Court has already appointed Deloitte as its interim receiver, and it's only until the 29th of October. And just now, according to the officials, they have not told us about the latest position, and they just told us that the receiver has put in an application so that during a particular period of time, DBC should be exempted from observing the relevant licensing conditions. But then I think we should follow the licensing conditions, and if there is a breach, then the departments concerned should tell us what it intends to do. In particular, where there is an interim receiver to this corporation, and the implication is that actually it might go into liquidation, there might be new investors or whatever. So whatever the outcome might be, we will have to deal with the employees, because for the staff's pay, well, just now we were told that there was $10 million left, and are we going to pay the employees? And I'd also like to put this to DBC's representatives today. All right, whatever the reason has been behind this incident. So what do you want to do? To what extent can the administration help? So in your mind, what do you think should be the ideal solution to this? So this is what the public is concerned about. As to the motion moved by Mr. Albert Chan, I have this skepticism. All right. For the setting up of select committees to look into this, well, can the terms of reference be such that we will be able to investigate or find out why shareholders of DBC have refused to inject funds into the corporation? It's not just about commercial dispute. It's about individuals' decision. So how can we do anything about it? All right, you have 3 questions. And Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, you're concerned about whether or not they will be penalized, or they will have their license revoked or suspended. And therefore, as Bureau Director, you will have to respond to that. On the issue of regulation, I'll ask Mr. Vincent Liu to respond. Yes. On the question on for how long DBC can continue to operate this way, and also with regard to the release or the payment of its staff, now it's in the hands of the interim receiver, and therefore we will have to ask the interim receiver as to how these problems will be resolved. As to the term for the interim receiver, and when it expires, can that be renewed? I think it's for the court to decide. As regards the past breaches committed by DBC, well, the Communications Authority will be dealing with that shortly. We will follow the requirements of the legislation and also the code of practice in dealing with this. Okay. It's already 11:10, and we only have 5 minutes to go before the end of this meeting. And of course, I can also extend it by another 5 minutes. Yes, you have a question? Yes, you may now continue. And also, just now, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok had a question for DBC. So, Mr. Morris Ho, can you answer the question? Can you repeat the question, please? Well, my question was, in fact, your question was, as Mr. Vincent Liu has already answered. All right, you have an interim receiver, and the receiver will have to deal with the issue of staff remolument or staff's pay. So what does DBC want to see? So can you come up with a solution? Do you have a solution in mind? Yes, Albert Chan. As I would very much like to respond to that, because Greg So also referred to me a number of times as to my request to meet with him. Actually, as early as last year, we already started to approach the Bureau. We already reminded them that there was a director's a director's dispute, and indeed on that occasion, Mr. Greg So explained the details of the law to me. But then he did not deal with my request. I did not ask him to come in. I did not ask him to deal with the so-called political interference. All I was asking was that he should have enforced the licensing conditions. Well, if there is any interference with the operation of a licensee, then he will have to deal with that. In order to ensure that the shareholders or directors, if they have a dispute, they should sit down to resolve their disputes. And of course, he already answered my question, and he said that it had nothing to do with them. And he said that I'm not a commercial mediator. That was the answer he gave me on that occasion. So that was what he told me on that occasion. That's what I'd like to clarify. My request was very simple. And if you do not deal with that, all you should be doing was to ask the directors to sit down and try to resolve the dispute. It's a very modest request. Well, from the beginning, he did not ask the administration to be the commercial mediator, but then to ask the administration to ask the two parties to sit down to resolve the disputes. So you will have to ask the directors, because that would affect the operation of the broadcasting service or of the broadcaster. I did not ask you to mediate. I just asked you to require the directors to sit down and resolve the dispute. And one of the hunger strikers he is now sent to Queen Mary Hospital. His mother's request was to shake hands with you, and you did not meet that request. Mr. Christopher Chung, please do not barge in, which is now according to Mr. Albert Chan. He did not say that there was political pressure. There was no question of political pressure. All this morning, we have heard about political suppression and so on. Well, you talk about political pressure. It's just from a third party's statement. All right, now we heard. These are rumors. You've heard it. So it's plucked out from thin air, according to your tape recordings. Sorry, those upstairs. You can't say that it's plucked out from thin air. For those upstairs, please, silence. Chairman, with regard to the tape recording, all right, 17 months ago, you made those remarks. So during the past 17 months, had you been subject to political suppression, and your station has been criticizing the government, you've been criticizing the Chinese Communist Party? If that was the case, then where has the pressure come from? So during the 17-month period, have you been subject to any political pressure? We have spent so much public money on this, and in fact, it's no question of political pressure. It's just an internal problem. So why have you not told us that? So what are we doing now? We are politicizing everything. Will that benefit anybody? Will that help solve any problem? Of course, there will be benefits. But of course, I don't know what those benefits are. Chairman, I think you've been doing a very lousy job in chairing the meeting. You are even worse than a district council chairman. You allow them to say whatever they want, and you're actually not allowing us to speak, and you're allowing people upstairs to shout and yell. So what kind of chairman is this? Have you finished? Yes. Every member has the right to express his personal views, including leveling attacks against the chairman. Also, Mr. Albert Chair, the so-called motion. How come there is no mention of this motion in the agenda? All right, or the timing. All right, you have this fact sheet, and it's one of the letters included in the fact sheet. I've never seen this. I've never seen that papers of a panel meeting can be prepared in such a manner. All right, it's put in a bundle of it's included in a bundle of papers, and how can we distinguish that from the other papers?
I just want to say one thing. The Secretary has provided papers to you in accordance with our rules of procedures. Now, if you want to be so unreasonable, as the chairman now, I won't handle this, but I'm not afraid of you. I will deal with you later. And as the chairman, I have to be fair and just. I now give you an opportunity. Now, don't be so complacent. There's still a lot of time for me to handle you. Okay, now let's vote. Chairman, clarification about Mr. Chung Shik-kan's remarks. He said that for the past 17 months we have been allowed to criticize the Chinese Communist Party and the Hong Kong government. And actually, we officially commenced our broadcast on the 21st of September. Well, Chung Shik-kan, I know that you have not done your homework, but for the electoral papers, they are all well prepared by the Secretariat. If you don't know how to be a councillor, you shouldn't be a councillor. So for Albert Chan's motion, let's vote on that. We already have a paper. Well, you criticize the Secretariat, but actually for the DAB, you have your own assistants. So I think you totally don't know what's going on. You can ask Yuk him. For this motion, it's actually very simple. This panel asked the legislative councils to establish a select committee, and it's about DBC's suspension or discontinuation of broadcast. And the terms of reference of the select committee are to investigate why the shareholders have stopped injecting funds, why has the DBC discontinued its service, and why the shareholders are unwilling to sell their shares, and to investigate whether the liaison office has exerted pressure on the shareholders of the DBC, and thus why, due to such political factors, they stopped injecting funds into DBC. Now, if we decide to establish a select committee on a certain matter, and this select committee is to exercise power under provisional bracket 1/382, then papers will be prepared by the Secretariat and the chairman will have to sign, etc. So time's up. Now let's vote. Secretary, well, I would like to let you know the government stance. Well, this is the internal affairs of a broadcaster. The government should not intervene, and the Legislative Council should not interfere with such internal affairs as well. Well, I'm the chairman. Now let's vote. I will say it once again. If you have direct or indirect financial interests, please think twice before you vote. Well, Chairman, just now I have a question. That is for our terms of reference. That is investigating why the shareholders do not want to sell their shares. So if this motion is passed, this will become one of our terms of reference. So do we have that right? Well, this has to be passed by the House Committee and the Council. So we are just voting here as the first step. So if you are not a member of this panel, you do not have the right to vote. For those who support this motion, please raise their hands. Nine. For those who object to the motion, please raise their hands. Anyone abstains? For those who say yes, 9, no, 8. So this motion is passed. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.